Sometimes I wonder if things would have turned out differently if I had just said no that day. No to helping, no to giving, no to staying quiet. But back then, I still believed that if I gave enough, loved enough, and stayed patient, they'd see me. They'd choose me too. I grew up in a little red brick house on Maple Lane. Nothing fancy, but it was home. Dad used to fix everything himself. Leaky faucets, broken fence posts, even the sagging porch step. Mom always kept the garden blooming with daisies and lavender. And my younger brother, Jason? He was the prince of the house. Jason was 4 years younger than me, and even from the beginning, it was clear he held a different position in the family. When I got an A, my parents smiled. When Jason got a B-, they clapped. "He tries so hard," Mom would say. "He's a boy, you know. School's harder for him." When he broke things, they were accidents. When I spoke up, I was dramatic. Still, I loved him. I loved all of them. And when I turned 18 and got accepted into college an hour away, I didn't make a fuss. I packed my bags, hugged my parents goodbye, and left the house on Maple Lane behind, trusting that it would always be there, our family's anchor. But things started shifting the moment I left. My parents never offered to help with my rent, even when I was juggling part-time jobs and classes. "You're doing great, sweetie," Mom would say on the phone. "It's good for you to learn independence." Meanwhile, Jason flunked out of community college and moved back home. "He's just figuring things out," Dad told me when I called, frustrated. "Not everyone finds their path right away." "Must be nice," I muttered, looking at the overdue rent notice on my kitchen table. By the time I was 26, I was living in a small but clean apartment and working full-time as a medical assistant. Every month, I sent my parents a little money to help out. Groceries, repairs, whatever they needed. It wasn't much, but it was consistent. Jason still lived at home. He was 22 and hadn't held a steady job in 3 years. But nobody talked about that. Not at birthdays, not at Christmas, not when I noticed the new car in the driveway with Jason's name on the plate. "Is that Jason's?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Dad chuckled. "Yeah, well, we co-signed. He needs to get around if he's ever going to land a decent job." "He doesn't have a job," I said. "How is he paying insurance?" There was a pause. Then Mom said sharply, "It's none of your business, Sophia. We're a family. We help each other." I bit my tongue. For years, I told myself to let it go. Family first. Be the bigger person. But something cracked the day I came home for Thanksgiving and noticed a for sale sign missing from the front yard. "Did you take the house off the market?" I asked, sipping coffee at the kitchen table. "Oh, honey," Mom said with a bright smile. "We didn't tell you. We decided not to sell. We're giving the house to Jason. He's going to settle down here. It's time." I blinked. "Wait, giving? As in, signing over the house?" "Of course," Dad chimed in. "It's the least we can do to help him get on his feet." I sat there stunned, the mug trembling in my hands. "You're giving him the house? Well, I've been paying rent on my own for nearly a decade. Sending you money?" "You've always been the responsible one," Mom said, as if it were a compliment. "You don't need help." "And Jason does?" I asked, my voice sharper now. "He's done nothing. You've handed him everything on a silver platter while I've worked for every scrap." Mom's face changed then. Tight, defensive, cold. "You're sounding very ungrateful, Sophia. You should be happy for your brother. Honestly, sometimes I think you resent him just because he's loved." "Loved?" I repeated, stunned. "Yes," she snapped. "You're nothing but a freeloader, Sophia. You take care of yourself." It hit like a punch to the gut. I'd been paying my way since I was 18, sending them money every month, showing up when they needed help, and somehow I was the freeloader. That night, I packed my bag early and drove back to my apartment in silence. No goodbye hugs, no leftovers packed to take home. Just that sentence playing over and over in my head. "You're nothing but a freeloader. You take care of yourself." And so I did. I took care of myself. For real this time. But I also did something else. I stopped the money train. The first morning after I canceled the transfers, I woke up expecting to feel guilty. I thought the silence in my apartment would feel like abandonment, like I'd cut off a limb or walked away from something sacred. But instead, I felt light, like I could finally breathe without dragging a 1,000-pound anchor behind me. That feeling didn't last long. It started with a voicemail from Mom. Her voice was deceptively cheerful, but I could hear the tension behind each word. "Hi, sweetie. I think something's wrong with the bank. The money didn't come through this month. Can you check on that? Hope you're well." I stared at the phone for a long moment, thumb hovering over the delete button, before pressing play again, just to be sure I'd really heard what I thought I did. No concern, no question about how I was doing. Just a request. No. A demand, dressed up in sweetness. That voicemail was followed by a text from Jason, just 2 words. "Where's rent?" No hi, no punctuation, not even a question mark. Just entitlement. By the end of the week, I'd received 3 more messages from Mom, each a little less sweet than the last. The final one was short and sharp. "Sophia, you can't just cut us off like this. Jason is counting on that money. And I don't appreciate being punished for a decision that was made for the good of our family." I didn't reply. For the first time in years, I chose silence. The following Sunday, my Aunt Linda called. She's my mom's older sister, a woman who always kept a healthy emotional distance from the drama but never missed a family holiday. I could hear the caution in her voice. "Sophia, your mom's been calling me. She's upset." "Because I stopped sending her money," I said flatly. There was a pause. "Yes, but also because, well, she says you're being selfish, that you're abandoning the family." I let out a bitter laugh. "I've been the family for years, Linda. Who do you think's been paying for groceries, for the plumber, for Jason's car repairs? They gave him the house and called me a freeloader." Linda sighed. "I know. I told her this would come back to bite her, but she's always had a blind spot where Jason's concerned. I just wanted to check in on you." "I'm fine," I said. "Better, actually." And that was the truth. Despite the barrage of guilt from Mom and Jason, there was something empowering about cutting the cord. I was finally living for myself, not waiting to be seen by people who never wanted to see me in the first place. But my peace didn't last long. A few weeks later, I came home from work to find an envelope slipped under my door. No return address, just my name written in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a letter, written in blue ink, slanted and rushed. "Sophia, I can't believe how cruel you've become. You think we're just mooching off you? That Jason doesn't deserve a chance? He's struggling. He's had setbacks. You, on the other hand, have always had it easy. Scholarships, a job, your own place. Not everyone's path is that simple. Jason needs the house. We need that money. And frankly, if you can't support your family in hard times, maybe you're not as good a daughter as you think you are. Your mother." I sat on my kitchen floor, the letter dangling from my fingertips. My stomach churned. Not because her words hurt, but because this time, they didn't. Not like before. I realized something in that moment. My mother wasn't writing from love or concern. She was writing from fear. Fear that the person she depended on was finally done. That the daughter who always gave, always complied, had disappeared. And she was right. I was done. The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. Then I got a call from my old neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. "Honey, I don't mean to meddle," she began, "but I saw Jason in your parents' front yard last night screaming into his phone, throwing things. Sounded like he was yelling about bills." I thanked her and hung up, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Jason was finally facing the real world, and it was eating him alive. I knew what was coming next. And I was right. A week later, Mom called again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. This one wasn't sweet or angry, it was desperate. Sophia, please, Jason's not handling this well. He's talking about selling the house, about moving in with some girl who doesn't even work. I don't know what to do. Please, we need you. I stared at the screen. Then slowly, with a calm I didn't know I possessed, I deleted the message. No callback, no explanation, just silence. They gave away the house I grew up in. They gave away their daughter in the process. And I was finally beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, that was a gift. It had been nearly 2 months since I stopped the payments. 2 months since I'd drawn a line in the sand, and for a while, I'd thought that maybe, just maybe, they'd accept it and move on. But I should have known better. The silence didn't last, because when guilt no longer worked, manipulation stepped in. It started with a knock on my door on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole cautiously. And there he was. Jason, hair slicked back like he was trying too hard, a cheap hoodie soaked through, and a smirk that made my stomach twist. "Open up, Soph. We need to talk," he said, as if we were old friends catching up over coffee. I didn't move. "Sophia, come on, I know you're in there." Still, I said nothing. Eventually, I heard him mutter something under his breath before walking away, shoes slapping angrily through the puddles. That should have been the end of it. But 2 days later, I found him again, this time sitting in the lobby of my office building. "Sophia," he said, standing as I stepped out of the elevator. "Don't make a scene." He looked worse than the last time I'd seen him. Pale, unshaven, twitchy, like someone who'd spent too many nights awake, too many mornings hungover. I walked past him without a word. "Wait," he snapped, grabbing my arm. "You're really gonna do this? Just cut us off and pretend like we don't exist?" I yanked my arm free and turned to face him. "You've existed just fine, Jason. On my dime. For years, you're so dramatic," he scoffed. "Mom's sick over this, you know. You've ruined her." "No, Jason," I said quietly. "She ruined herself by choosing to protect you instead of raise you. And now she wants me to clean up the mess." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Wow, you really think you're better than us. I think I worked for everything I have. You wouldn't know what that feels like." He stepped back like I'd slapped him. "Fine," he muttered. "You'll regret this. Family's all you have." But that was the thing. He wasn't my family anymore. Not the kind that meant safety or love or loyalty. Just shared blood and years of disappointment. The next week, I got a call from my old high school friend, Rachel. "Hey," she said hesitantly. "I saw your mom at the church potluck. She was telling people things." "What kind of things?" She hesitated. "That you cut her off. That you've gone cold, ungrateful. That you're too busy climbing the corporate ladder to care about your own mother." I exhaled slowly. Of course she did. "She also said you threatened Jason." That stopped me cold. "What?" "Yeah. She said he came to talk to you and you threatened to call the police. Said you're trying to tear the family apart." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so typical. This was always Mom's talent, rewriting the story until she was the tragic hero and I was the cruel daughter. "That never happened," I said flatly. "I figured," Rachel replied. "Just wanted you to know what's going around." What struck me wasn't that Mom was twisting the truth. It was how easily she'd weaponized it. I'd grown up thinking that family meant loyalty, honesty, love. But for her, family meant control. And the moment she couldn't control me anymore, she rewrote me into the villain. The final straw came 3 days later. I had just finished cleaning my apartment when my phone buzzed. An email from a realtor. "Hi, Sophia. Following up regarding your inquiry. I've attached the listing for the house on Maple Lane as discussed. Let me know if you'd like to schedule a tour." I froze. I hadn't contacted any realtor. I hadn't asked for a tour. Confused, I opened the attachment. And there it was. My childhood home. Listed for sale. Photos of the living room where we once put up Christmas trees. The kitchen where Mom used to bake banana bread. It was all there, staged and spotless. And not a single trace of our family left in it. I called Aunt Linda in a panic. "They're selling it?" I asked. "After giving it to Jason?" She sighed. "He's in debt, Sophia. Maxed out 3 credit cards. He's already pawned your dad's old tools, sold the riding mower. I guess the house was next." My throat tightened. Not because I wanted the house. I didn't. But because it was never about the house. It was about what it represented. Years of memories, sacrifice, of believing that home was something permanent. And now it was being flipped for cash like it meant nothing at all. They gave it to him. He gutted it. And now they expected me to pick up the pieces. But I wouldn't. Not this time. They'd burned the bridge. And all I could do now was make sure I didn't build it back. I didn't cry when I saw the house listing. I thought I would. I expected it, even prepared for it. But the tears didn't come. Instead, I felt hollow, like something inside me had finally snapped loose and floated away. I stared at the photos for a long time. The beige walls had been repainted a trendy gray. The daisy garden was gone, replaced by a layer of decorative rocks. The front porch swing where Dad used to drink coffee on Sunday mornings had vanished, replaced by a generic bench with throw pillows. It looked like any other house now. Any stranger scrolling Zillow would never know what used to live there, what used to matter there. The longer I looked, the more I realized the house was already gone. Not just physically, spiritually, emotionally. It had stopped being mine the moment my parents decided it was Jason's reward for existing. I closed the listing, exhaled slowly, and opened a new tab. Savings account. For months, I'd been quietly moving the $1,500 I used to send them into a dedicated fund. I hadn't really thought about what I'd use it for. At first, it was just a silent protest, a way to reclaim a piece of myself. But now I knew. It was time to build something of my own. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, just out of love. For myself. I started browsing listings in nearby neighborhoods. Modest homes. Quiet streets. Nothing fancy, just something stable. Something I could fill with warmth on my terms. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next day, I made a list of everything I needed to do. Credit checks, down payment details, mortgage prep. It was overwhelming but exhilarating. For once, my energy wasn't being drained by a family crisis. It was being poured into me. And maybe that was the biggest shift. I was finally choosing myself. Still, the ghosts lingered. On Sunday, I found myself reaching for the phone, out of habit. I used to call Mom every week, just to check in, to make sure she was okay, to ask about Jason, even though I dreaded the answers. But now, what was there left to say? She had made her choice. Over and over again, and each time it hadn't been me. Later that afternoon, I got a message from Aunt Linda. "I thought you should know. Your mom asked the church for financial support. Said her daughter abandoned her. Said Jason was struggling and that nobody was helping." I stared at the message, a bitter taste rising in my throat. Even now, even after everything, she was still playing the victim. Abandoned? I had been the one abandoned. Emotionally, financially, spiritually. But the narrative she was spinning had erased all of that. In her story, I was the cold daughter. The selfish one. And maybe that hurt more than anything else. Because she was rewriting history, one whisper at a time. I replied to Linda's message. Let her say what she wants. I'm done correcting the record. And I meant it. Let her build her version of events. Let Jason wallow in his delusions. Let them both cling to the story where they were wronged. I was too busy writing a new one. Mine. That week, I scheduled a tour for a little two-bedroom bungalow on the edge of town. It wasn't perfect. The backyard needed work, and the kitchen was a time capsule from 1992. But the moment I stepped inside, something clicked. It felt safe. I ran my fingers along the worn banister, picturing weekend mornings with coffee and music, dinners with friends, a quiet life built not on appeasement or sacrifice, but on peace. The real estate agent smiled at me. "It has good bones," she said. "So do I replied before I could stop myself. That night, I put in an offer. It was accepted the next morning. And just like that, something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. I was building something real. And no one, not my mother, not Jason, not their manufactured crises, could touch it. They could spin their stories. They could gossip and play victims. But I had chosen to step out of their orbit, to stop begging for scraps of affection, to stop proving my worth to people who were determined not to see it. I was done being the good daughter if that meant being the invisible one. This new life, it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The house was mine. The deed was signed, the boxes unpacked, and the air filled with the soft scent of freshly brewed coffee and lemon-scented cleaner. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. A place no one gave to me, no one could take away, and no one would use against me. For the first time in my life, I had something that belonged only to me. I was still getting used to the quiet. There were no passive-aggressive voicemails, no late-night texts from Jason asking for a little help, no guilt-laced messages from Mom implying I owed them for daring to be independent. Peace was strange, but beautiful. And then, on a Sunday afternoon in early spring, someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the window and felt my heart drop. Jason. He stood there like a misplaced memory. Unkempt, eyes bloodshot, hands stuffed into the pockets of a worn hoodie. He hadn't changed, still carried himself like the world owed him something. I didn't want to open the door. Every cell in my body told me not to. But I did, because some part of me needed to hear what he had come to say. "Hey," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. I didn't respond. I just leaned against the doorframe and waited. He shifted uncomfortably. "Can I come in?" "No," I said, calm and steady. "Say whatever you came to say right here." He scratched at the back of his neck and looked around like someone might rescue him from the awkwardness. "Mom's sick," he said finally. I didn't flinch. I waited. "She fell a couple weeks ago. Hurt her hip pretty bad. The doctor said she needs surgery, but, well, we can't afford it." There it was, the pitch. "Insurance?" I asked. "Denied part of the claim. Said it was pre-existing. I don't know, it's complicated." I crossed my arms. "So what does this have to do with me?" He blinked like he couldn't believe I was asking. "She needs help, Soph. Real help. And you've always been the responsible one." There it was again. You're the responsible one. Their favorite justification for why I had to fix everything. "You're her son," I said. "You live in the same town. Why aren't you helping her?" His face darkened. "You think I haven't tried? I've been taking care of her alone for months while you're off living your best life in your cute little house." The words stung, but not in the way he intended. They didn't make me feel guilty. They made me angry. "Taking care of her?" I repeated. "Jason, she's been taking care of you your whole life. And now that she actually needs someone, you come running to me?" His jaw clenched. "This isn't fair, Sophia. She's our mom." "No," I said. "She was your mom. I was just the backup plan. The ATM, the one who didn't need help, so they never gave it." He looked stunned, like he hadn't expected me to say it out loud, like deep down he knew it was true. "She's asking for one last chance," he said. To fix things. She talks about you all the time. Says she wishes you'd come back. That she messed up. Did she send you? I asked. He hesitated. She doesn't know I'm here. I raised an eyebrow. So you're here to manipulate me on her behalf? And she doesn't even know? Or did she just not want to be the one to face me? He didn't answer. I sighed and stepped back slightly. I hope she recovers, Jason. I do, but I'm not paying for it. And I'm not coming back. But, no, I said sharply. She made her choice. So did I. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. You really don't care, do you? And there it was. The final card they always played. If you don't help, you don't care. I do care, I said quietly. I cared for years, and it nearly broke me. But caring doesn't mean I have to keep letting you bleed me dry. He took a step back. You've changed. Yeah, I nodded. I finally did. He lingered a moment longer, like he might say something else. But then he turned and walked down the steps without another word. As I closed the door, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the family I'd never really had. Relief that I'd finally stopped pretending I ever would. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down in the sunlight streaming through my window. Jason was right. I had changed, and it was the best thing I'd ever done. Spring came early that year. The trees on my street bloomed in soft pinks and whites, like nature had decided to throw a celebration just for me. It had been nearly a year since I stopped sending money. A year since the house on Maple Lane was sold. A year since I'd heard my mother's voice. In that time, something inside me had shifted in ways I hadn't expected. I no longer woke up with that tight knot in my chest, dreading a text, an email, a call asking for more. I stopped flinching when an unknown number flashed on my screen. I smiled more, slept deeper, took up weekend hikes, started reading again. I even adopted a cat. Marbles, a clumsy little rescue who insisted on knocking things off the counter just to watch them fall. There was no single moment when I knew I'd healed. It was more like a quiet unfolding. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and had finally remembered how to exhale. But the real turning point came in the most unexpected way. I was at the grocery store, comparing almond milk brands, when I heard someone behind me say my name. Sophia? I turned. It was Mrs. Jennings, our old neighbor from Maple Lane. She used to bring over casseroles when Dad was alive and had this permanent scent of lilac perfume and cinnamon gum. My goodness, she said, smiling warmly. I almost didn't recognize you. You look happy. I laughed softly. I am. She placed a hand over her heart. I'm so glad, sweetheart. I've worried about you. After all that mess with the house and your mother? I nodded gently, not eager to rehash old stories, but she wasn't finished. Do you ever hear from them? No, I said simply, and I'm okay with that. She studied me for a moment, her expression shifting to something almost regretful. Your mom used to sit on the porch some nights after you moved out. I'd see her just staring into the dark, sometimes crying. I think she always thought you'd come back, that she could fix it. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to scoff. Another part, a smaller, quieter part, just felt tired. I used to think I had to fix it too, I said, but I learned the hard way. You can't heal in the same place that broke you. Mrs. Jennings nodded. No, you can't, but you can grow somewhere new. That night, I sat on my back porch with marbles curled beside me, a blanket wrapped around my legs, and a quiet peace settling into my bones. I thought about my mother, about Jason, about the version of me that had once believed love was something you had to earn by sacrificing parts of yourself. And then I thought about the girl who moved into this little house with nothing but a savings account, a few bruises on her soul, and a flicker of hope. She had no idea she was building a life. Not just a refuge, but a future. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven them. And the truth is, I don't know. Forgiveness isn't always some grand declaration. Sometimes it's just choosing not to carry the weight anymore. It's waking up and making your coffee without bitterness. It's not looking back. And maybe that's enough. I haven't heard from Jason since that day he showed up on my porch. Rumor has it he moved in with his girlfriend's parents, burned through the last of Mom's savings, and floated from job to job, always chasing the next excuse. As for Mom, I don't know. Aunt Linda says she still lives nearby, still goes to church, still complains about me to anyone who'll listen. But none of that matters anymore, because I've finally learned the most important truth of all. Being someone's daughter doesn't mean sacrificing your happiness to earn their love. Love given with conditions isn't love. It's leverage, and I'm done being leveraged. These days, I spend my energy on the people who show up without asking for anything in return. Friends who remember my birthday. Coworkers who check in just because. Strangers who hold the door with a smile. And most of all, myself. I planted a garden last month. Just some herbs and a few stubborn sunflowers. Nothing fancy. But when I kneel in the dirt, feel the sun on my back, and watch something grow where there was once only emptiness, I think this is what healing looks like. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet, steady growth.